The anthropologist Mary Douglas once wrote a famous chapter in her book Natural Symbols with the title of The Bog Irish. This was not a piece of crude racism, quite the contrary. It was a study in how rural Irish Catholics of the time, which was 1970, still lived out their faith, still expressed their religious identity through food and drink, feasting and fasting. Her point, unfashionable at the time, was that communal penitential practices, like fasting on Fridays, eating fish, say, that these were a better symbolic expression of Catholic identity, penitential identity, than the more purely verbal, cerebral worship then favoured by the Catholic middle classes of England. Why was that? Well, because human beings are social animals, creatures who say who we are by how we eat. Families, colleges, Dominican friars share common meals. Mothers and the motherly show love for their offspring by attempting to feed them up. The Celts, we are told, fasted to sharpen their anger before going into battle. Christians assemble for a common Eucharist. Although pre-lockdown masses may have divided a community according to taste, folk, Latin, or sleepy silence, the Sunday Mass is supposed to be a gathering of the entire local church around a single altar. Now, all of this is by way of preface to today's saint, Wulstan, Bishop of Worcester. He's a man remembered for many virtues. He campaigned against the slave trade that operated through the port of Bristol. He encouraged monastic reform in the West Country. And those were days when if the monks sang the wrong tone, they might find a company of archers targeting them from the gallery. I just hope Father Bruno, our cantor, doesn't get any ideas. Bishop Wulstan was tireless in journeying around his diocese, confirming children, putting in stone altars for the churches, and preaching reconciliation to divided communities. And given that his time in office spanned the Norman conquest, there were many to be reconciled. But he impressed contemporaries not least for how he ate. He gave up meat as a luxury, and he fed large numbers of the destitute who crowded round his doors. Now, in itself, this sort of almsgiving is a conventional piety of medieval bishops and nobles. Such people might feed 100 or so poor men and women on a given feast day. But Wulstan did more than feed them. He invited them to his own table, where they were waited on as honoured guests. So he saw in them the dignity of being sisters, brothers in our Lord Jesus Christ. He respected them as fellow children of one Father. And that faith was symbolized through food. So when we have measured up someone's intellect, or sized up their good looks, or heard their accent, do we also remember their Christian dignity and respect? And in particular, in the Eucharist, in our communion, where Christ is present in the sacrament of the altar. Let's reverence his presence in our midst, his presence on the altar, his presence in his word, and his presence in the body of believers.